Okay, hello and welcome to the world of online mediation. My name's Scott Docherty, a member of CAM Scotland and Family Mediator. And I'm here today with Ewan Malcolm, amongst other things, Chair of the College of Mediators, Board Member of the Family Mediation Council, and also Chief Executive of Relate London North West. Welcome, Ewan.
Thank you very much, Scott. It's good to be here.
Excellent. So we're talking today about online mediation. This is really part of the introduction to our course about online mediation. A general chat about its merits, some of the challenges facing online mediators today, and how the world of online mediation might look some years down the line. So I thought I'd kick things off, first of all, with a quote from Jim Melamed, who you might know, and amongst other things, he co-founded the hugely resourceful mediator.com. And Jim predicted back in 2009 that in the future, the online environment and technology will allow us to bring mediation to every pocket and purse, and that our communication options might become so good that mediators will become part of live conflict situations, providing real-time help. It was an interesting concept. So let's see how close we are at the moment to that scenario. First of all, Ewan, then, can you describe what online mediation actually is?
Well, people use the term in many different settings. What we mean by online mediation is a face-to-face discussion about a conflict or difference with a view to finding a mutually acceptable solution, so standard mediation, via video. And that means that the people who are parties to the dispute are communicating directly, involving the mediator through the use of technology which involves a video camera and a computer and the internet, of course, because that's the way that they're all connected. So essentially it is in that synchronous environment that we're mediating, rather than, as some people call online mediation, an asynchronous, a different time, possibly even by text. We're not talking about that, even although that's a useful and different approach.
Sure. So in what situations do you think online mediation can come in handy?
So the kind of situations that I found that the online environment can be used in is, firstly, when the parties can't get together because of some sort of geographical constraint. That could be that they are in different parts of the country or even in different parts of the world. It could be that they're even in different parts of the city, and it's really difficult to schedule a time when they could come together because travel across a large city can be as onerous and difficult as across the world in some instances. So geographical distance is an issue. Secondly, time, the scheduling I mentioned, but the difficulty of finding a time when people can all be together. And then thirdly, it's really useful if somebody physically can't move, so perhaps because of some incapacity, disability, that they would be restricted. Beyond those sort of logistical issues, I think online mediation via video can be really useful where there is such a high level of conflict, or perhaps even a danger to a party, that it's important that people aren't physically in the same place. Now, I would use that with some difficulty, but I think there's a great deal, or with some care, but I think there is some utility in that. What we still do focus on is that video can allow it to be face-to-face, just as you and I are face-to-face at the moment.
Yes. And that's, I suppose, one of the main concerns that some people have about mediation, where there is a highly contentious situation and possibly physically abusive situation. Mediation simply can't occur. Simply, people are just black and white about that. But you're saying that online mediation might be a way around that?
Well, it can, in some situations, provide sufficient safety for the person who needs that dialogue, because still they need to find something that will be of use to their situation, but does need a physical protection of not being in the same space. And it's possible, because the mediator can set the security around the online environment, to set it up so that one of the parties doesn't know where the other actually is sitting. So I think there is utility there in some exceptional circumstances. It's more likely that because of the logistics, you would want to use it, or more importantly, the clients would want to use it.
Yeah.
That's certainly where I've used online video.
Yeah, and I think you've mentioned before about how one of the core principles of mediation is its flexibility, its ability to mould itself around the needs of the parties themselves. So if they have difficulties with geography or time, or as you say, disabilities or any other considerations, it's about finding the right method of mediation, and online mediation may be a way forward for that.
Absolutely. I would emphasize that people do fear, those who perhaps have practiced face-to-face mediation a lot in person, they fear that they might lose something by moving to face-to-face via video. And I would say from my own experience that once you get used to the environment online, that distance tends to disappear, or certainly gets a lot shorter. Strangely, when you're online, you're looking more directly at people than you tend to be when you're in a mediation room. The kind of gaze that you would have on a screen might even be a bit uncomfortable for those who are sitting in a room. Now, of course, that the gaze does have to be different. You may notice that I'm flicking my eyes from looking at you directly to looking at the screen in front of me, so I can see your face.
That's right.
But when I am looking at you, I'm looking straight on rather than at typically the acute angle that we set our chairs up in a room.
Yeah, and that's one of the, I was going to ask about the various challenges that the mediators would face in changing from an offline environment into an online environment, and one of those challenges that many people mention about online mediation is the body language aspect. I'm not sure if you were aware, there's a study out in March 2016 at the University of Texas, and it's on latent semantic similarity. It examines how people get in sync linguistically. And amongst other things, it found that strangers who exchanged more words with each other, asking more questions and acknowledging answers, they actually achieved higher levels of mutual understanding than strangers who relied more on non-verbal cues. It's always the case, I suppose, that as studies and outcomes catch up with technological developments, we learn more about how things are going. And I've been reading more and more about how less importance has been placed on body language, particularly in conflict resolution. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, people often quote the classic research, or perhaps even misquote the classic research about the amount that you get from body language as opposed to the amount that you get from the words that are spoken. Typically 7% from the words and the rest from the other context around that. That particular study emphasized that people were actually getting the context or the meaning rather than actually the understanding. I think that the study you quote does direct us to how important words are. It is, however, different when we do see somebody delivering the words.
Yes.
I've mediated often on the telephone, perfectly competently. However, I do get a greater appreciation of what the intent is when I see this bit of the person.
Yeah.
There's good evidence to show that although you can't see the rest of my body here, the big actions aren't really what are going to tell you what I am thinking, because you're looking at this bit to get that. And as I say, in this environment, this is kind of hyper real, particularly if you blow it up on a big screen.
That's right.
The other thing is that we learn from our counselling colleagues that who have been doing one-to-one counselling over the internet for some time using video, that rapport between the counsellor and the client is good as, and sometimes better or more quickly established via the video link. Why is that? Well, the hypothesis is that it's because the client at the other end is in a more comfortable environment. Rather than in the counsellor's office or the mediator's mediation room, they're coming to you from a place that they have set up rather than you. So I think that there could be, as we get more used to this environment, advantages rather than or overlaying advantages that would outweigh some of the disadvantages.
That's right, that's right. So thinking then about perhaps not the other disadvantages, but the other challenges that online mediators would face other than the body language part of it. I'm thinking about confidentiality. That's a big thing.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I've given it quite a lot of thought because it is one of the things that I think quite rightly people are most concerned about. So what if somebody was surreptitiously recording this from their mobile phone, with an excellent camera, and then posted the video online, YouTube and all the rest? Well, I would say that actually I have come across at least 2 mediators recently who have had to intervene in their mediation rooms where somebody was recording surreptitiously. The danger is no greater than in the room. So what you do about that is to ensure that you have at all the stages prior to and during the mediation agreement and checking.
Yeah.
We do, most of our work is based on building trust, and that is one of the elements of trust. So make sure your contract has appropriate terms, make sure you check, make sure you ask people to show. The other bit that people are again rightly concerned about is interruptions. Interruptions that would be distracting or perhaps even overcoming of the mediation, and that's a preparation. Of course, you can't set up the room in the way that you do with your own mediation room, where you know that you've got somebody outside or whatever the arrangements are, but you can step through with your clients in advance the advantages of making sure that the family or the dog or the postman aren't going to interrupt, and that it's going to be set at a time when the environment would be comfortable for them as well as others. In family mediation, sometimes there's been a concern that the pictures behind, for instance, in a family home where one party is in the former matrimonial home and the other isn't, might be distracting and evoke more difficulty. Well, that's again something that a mediator who's experienced in this environment would think about with the client in advance, in the same way that you think when you do your individual intakes with parties about how best they can use this opportunity to mediate. And then the fourth or third bit that people are concerned about is, well, what if somebody's behind the camera manipulating the person? Yes. And again, that concern, I think is a legitimate, but one that I think one could again, when it arises as a concern by the parties, be addressed quite clearly. People can turn the camera around and just show folk who what the situation is in the room. Yes. You can't absolutely stop somebody listening in, but if assurances are given and contracts are signed, then I think you're doing the best that you can in that setting. And I would say that the Family Mediation Council in England and Wales has just published guidelines on this sort of thing with a model contract for people who are mediating. So there's resources out there.
Yes, and the course will obviously consider that as well. But I was going to ask about the guidelines, and you've very kindly mentioned that without my having to raise it. Also, you talk about interruptions getting in the way. I'm thinking technical interruptions. Is that an issue you think needs to be addressed?
It can be. The technology is improving month by month, and in fact week by week. The key things are having a computer or a laptop which is sufficiently modern to be able to have a decent microphone. I'm using a headset here, you're not, but it being in an environment which can be picked up, so you can hear and be heard, and a camera that's clear enough. And then, of course, an internet connection. Now, broadband can be amazing in the most remote places and awful in the most urban situations.
No rhyme or reason.
No, well, it seems like that sometimes. The first advice we give to people, and we'll go into this in more detail, is to check this in advance, and that's where you do your pre-meetings. You make sure you do that over the internet, and also that you have a plan B. What in the event of a breakdown will happen, and that's about making sure you have to hand the telephone numbers and a routine. I'll call party A first and party B second, and can you hold on and be ready to take my call? And sometimes I've continued mediation by telephone, or otherwise it's a matter of rescheduling.
Yeah, it's almost the same as we do offline and pointing out the fire exits at the start of the session. Yeah.
Something akin to that. Yep, absolutely.
That's right. So those involved in family conflict resolution talk about access to justice. The ability of those separating to choose the most appropriate process to sort things out fairly. It's safe to say, I think, over time that in the world of small claims and consumer disputes, for various reasons, more and more people have been moving away from the traditional court route of resolving things and moving towards mediation or online dispute resolution. And essentially, I suppose those in disputes are opting more for processes that are flexible, they're tailored, minimal cost and time, and where they retain as much control as possible. And they're also able to sort things out without airing their dirty linen in public. So in the coming years, as the technology that you've talked about improves and online tools become more accessible, do you see this trend being reflected in family conflicts?
I do, and I think that there is, beyond the technology, which is just amazing, I think that there is a demographic reality that is approaching us. Those who were born millennials, people in the born in the 90s, are used to this technology. Those who've been born since the turn of the century have been completely immersed in this technology. It is absolutely normal for them. Yeah. So those of us who haven't had that experience from birth might feel less comfortable with this. We're adopters, but those digital natives will just be bemused that it's not possible to do this online. So we better start getting used to it. I personally don't see that will stop face-to-face happening, because I think that there is something about the convenience of doing things locally in one place and getting together. There's something also about an intuitive desire to have the difficulties that have arisen addressed face-to-face. So, yes. So I think people will continue to demand that, but I do see that our practice will become more blended, and where we're seeing a growth at the moment in demand for online is where we've started face-to-face, and people want to keep going, but for other reasons they can't, and this technology helps us to provide the service for them.
That's right. Now, I think you've said before that it's not a case of replacing something that's been here for a while. It's an addition and another opportunity to adapt the service that you provide for parties coming to mediation, and again the ability for the process to mould itself around their needs.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's where the future lies, blended, and then when those folk who are now 16 or even 5 move to a demographic which I suppose in family mediation might be 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, it will just be strange that we're not working online for them, because that's how they conduct a lot of their lives.
Just out of interest, going back to the quote that I started with Jim, do you think that we'll move on to live conflict situations in the future?
I think it's an exciting idea. I am a great believer that we need to move mediation closer to the source of the dispute. Now, that takes a lot of courage, and perhaps that courage would be greater if we could simply provide it online, because we can do it from anywhere, and we are not, I suppose, personally physically in any danger. It would take a lot of courage also from the parties. Calling the mediator straight away is I think something that I would aspire to. People would think, well, let's go to a conflict resolution discussion rather than lifting the arms. Yeah. So I think it is a challenge to us to make this available so that we are capable of working straight off and become, I suppose, to an extent, peacemakers right at the early stage, even conflict interrupters, so that we are at the point where conflict is kicking off. And you know, who knows, the notion of call the mediator might be call them now.
Well, exactly, if you've been watching BBC Two, yes. So I think we touched very briefly also on online dispute resolution, and I think just to be clear, it might be a good idea for you to just explain the difference between online mediation and online dispute resolution, or perhaps how they fit in with each other.
Yes. So I mentioned right at the top of this that there are devices, I suppose, using the clever algorithms that the internet allows us access to, whereby people can get information and even potentially options for resolving via websites which have at the back of them stuff which will help them come up with conclusions. So online dispute resolution tends to be a giving of information and then a matching of offers and proposals, so that the overlap, which we as mediators are often looking, can be delivered to the clients in a more automated way. So one of the biggest resolvers of disputes is the eBay provider that resolves, I'm told, somewhere in the region of 6 million disputes a year, and very little human contact is involved with that. And these resolutions, which are strictly commercial, need to be dealt with quickly, efficiently, cost-effectively, and the technology helps that to happen, and it's great that that is happening. That is quite different from online mediation, which would involve a person being involved and having the dialogue that as mediators we know we do in the room.
Sure. And again, it's just about choosing the process that's right for yourself.
Yeah, matching the process to the fuss.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Well, thanks, Ewan. I hope this has given those watching a few things to think about ahead of the training course. If you've booked a place on the training course, before it begins, I'd encourage those watching to take a look at the other materials on the shared drive you'll have access to. And if you have any questions you'd like us to address during the course, just add them to the Burning Questions document that you'll find in the drive. For those of you interested in training with us in online mediation, we'd be delighted if you joined the waiting list, which you'll find on the links at the end of this video. So in the meantime, thanks for watching, and thanks for your contribution, Ewan.
You're very welcome.
And we look forward to meeting you online soon.
See you then.